Thanks so much to Hannah for recording the session. So just as a reminder for folks who are new, Innovate US is a nonpartisan nonprofit that works with state learning, data, and innovation leaders across 5 US states to create and support state workers with learning offerings in digital data and innovation skill sets. All of our content is free and open, and we have been creating these workshops and sharing them across our partner states last year. And we will be starting after this first session, kicking off a free workshop every other week. So be on the lookout for that email from us, and we will go ahead and kick this off. So we're really excited today to have Steve Kadish with us. Steve Kadish has been, after 5 years, a senior research fellow at Harvard Kennedy School, focused on the Center for State and Local Government. But previously, he served as the chief of staff to Charlie Baker of Massachusetts, where he worked to shape and implement policy and operational improvements in key state agencies, worked with the governor's cabinet, Massachusetts state legislature, and external stakeholders. We're really excited to have him here because Steve and Governor Baker co-authored a book that's entitled Results: Getting Beyond Politics to Get Important Work Done, a Leader's Guide to Executing Change and Delivering Results. Congrats to Steve, as it was just published in May 2022. And we're really excited to have him here to share much about this framework and about more of his work. So Steve will share the first probably 35 to 40 minutes. We'll record that part of the presentation. And then, thanks, John says best title ever. And then we will turn off the recording, and it'll just be an open Q&A for you to be able to engage Steve around questions or problems that you're working through. So Steve, again, thank you so much for being with us. And I will hand it over to you.
Great. Happy New Year, everyone. For me, it's really a privilege to do this, and I want to thank Innovate US to be able to do the kickoff presentation. I'm going to do 2 things in this presentation. The first is I call context, and it's a little bit out of the box, but it's the kind of stuff that I have been thinking about lately, and I think underpins all of our work. And then the second thing that I'll do is flash through the results framework, which we talk about, which is the core of the book that Governor Baker and I just published. So, Kate and Heather, I'm happy to make this deck available. So I don't know what you typically do. So I'm going to go through it quickly. There's a lot of content on the slides. You're welcome to scribble down or type as fast as you can, but I'm quite happy to make the deck available. And in turn, you see my email contact information. Very happy to talk to folks either about what's in here that you'll see in the next 35 minutes or so, or to address or talk about other issues. So, can everybody hear me? If folks would just nod or thumbs up, or great, okay. So here we go. Whoops. I will try it again. There. Okay. So this is as the title says on the left. This is New York City, 5th Avenue, 120 years ago. Bear with me. I'm going to do one thing with my screen. Okay. Where's the car? So this is the turn of the century. It's incredibly crowded. Sidewalks crowded, streets are crowded. Where's the car? So look hard. There is one car in this photo. All the rest of this is horse and buggy. One car. Now, 12, 13 years later, same picture. New York New York City, Fifth Avenue, where's the horse? This unbelievable change in technology in this incredible short period of time. And uh, so do folks see it? It's right there, almost in the same place as the previous photo. So for me, this is, this unbelievable visual example of technology's impact on, there's a lot of folks that do transportation here, but this unbelievable impact in our lives. So the next thing I want to do contextually is talk about who we are in terms of it from a generation perspective. And the reason that I do this for us, for you, for us public servants, is because this is who we serve. This is who we are, and as far as employees. So in this one slide, I go from just the end of World War II, right, the baby boomers, to about 10 years ago through Generation Z. The baby boomers have been, up until recently, the largest generation by population. But we're going away. By 2050, there'll only be 16, 17 million of us, as opposed to 80 million of us 30 years ago. The big technology for us, I'm a boomer, was television. I can remember the first television. I can remember the first color set. Generation X followed. So this is 1966 to 1980. It was the smallest generation by birth in the US, but very significant in terms of immigration. And the big technology during this period was the advent of computers. Barely laptops, but computers. There were a few of them in offices. A few people had them in their homes. Millennials are next, 1981 to 1999. And if I ask people for a show of hands, I'm guessing that a lot of folks are in this generation. It has been the largest generation. You guys know, you have lived the advent of the internet, smartphones, social media through everything. But for boomers and Generation X, these were new technologies. Generation Z, 1999, crosses into the new centennial through 2012. These are folks, and they could be your kids. I have a grandchild in this generation, and they're born with the internet, portable technology, streaming, and COVID was huge. COVID was huge for all of us, but COVID was this foundational kind of experience. So I want to introduce you to two more generations. In a second, I'll do that. So by 2040, which in my mind is just right around the corner, 15, 16, 17 years from now, most heads of households will be headed by somebody born after 1980. I like this chart because you literally see the silent generation, which was the generation before the boomers, literally going away. You see the visible shrinkage of the baby boomers. You see the strength of Generation X, the strength of the millennials actually in leading in all kinds of way. And you see the beginning of in 2030, and then much more strongly in 2040, that Generation Z are leading households. If I were to update this chart, I would be adding the next generation. Why households? Households are make decisions about where to live, how to get health care, key transportation, education, raising families, and so forth. And so this is, I think, an important view of all the different ways that you can view demographics. So what comes after Generation Z? Meet Generation Alpha. So this is the first generation that was entirely born in the 21st century. for the most part, they're children of millennials. The social networking and streaming services, it's how they do things. And again, the COVID-19 pandemic has been just huge in the growth and development of this generation. And so what comes after Generation Alpha? And if you think about going back, we had Generation Z. And so you go back to the beginning of the alphabet, kind of like the hurricane season, and you have Generation Alpha. What comes after Generation Alpha? We'll meet Generation Beta. And so this is just a couple years from now. And so this generation, if we were to do a chart like this in about 10 years from now, 20 years from now, which isn't long in our work lives. It's certainly not long in how we develop and implement and do programming, is that Generation Alpha, Generation Beta are going to be important in terms of workforce and also important in terms of who we serve. So now I'm going to do in just a second. So I do this because I want to, for me, I think about overall context equals change equals context. And so I think about technology. In fact, this whole idea of Zooming and what it has done from COVID in terms of us communicating today, telework, telemedicine, teleeducation, and so forth is just huge. And then I wanted to share with you just some, really brief thoughts, or begin to share with you some ways for you to think about demographics and generations. I would put climate change as this other huge contextual, existential thing that's happening to everyone. And I ask you to think about what of this resonates with you, and what are you concerned about in addition to the understanding of technology and who we are, and demographics as well as climate. So now I'm going to switch gears. I had the opportunity, took a long time, took us 5 years to do this, working on and off and through COVID. But I had a chance to co-author this book with Governor Charlie Baker, and it was, as Kate said, it was just released by Harvard Business Review this past May. We always start with this, or I always start with this quote: "Let us not seek the Republican answer or the Democratic answer, but the right answer. Let us not seek to fix blame for the past. Let us accept our own responsibility for the future." John F. Kennedy. So here's a picture of Governor Baker on the left, and ironically, I'm on the right. This is in my office in the State House. Governor Baker's office was next to me. Charlie Baker is a lifelong Republican. I am a lifelong Democrat, and he chose me to be his chief of staff. We had worked with one another on and off by the end of this for over 3 decades. In both the public sector and in the private sector, in seeing the names of the agencies that many of you put up to introduce yourselves. I've worked close, either in or closely, I think, with all of the different agencies that were mentioned. But here Baker barely won the election in 2014, chooses a Democrat as a chief of staff. At that time, I believe we were the only, bipartisan governor and chief of staff in the nation. I think there's one other that I'm aware of now, or at least was true last year. And he chose me because we spent a lot of time working on problems. I wasn't part of his political apparatus. I obviously supported him. But when I stepped down after 2.5, almost 3 years as his chief of staff, we talked about writing this book. I went to the Kennedy School as a base to do that. And he and I over the years had shared articles, books, about how to do things, how to get things done, how to make things happen. almost exclusively all the books were business books. So for our public sector work, it required a translation. And so we wrote this book for public sector leaders and managers like you. It's written by folks from the public sector, Governor Baker and myself. And it's about how to tackle important public sector problems to address important, to help deliver public sector services. We started off this book in 2017, 2018, and we really were focused as this being a book about how. And then with the January 6th insurrection, riot, the strongest terms I think that anybody can use, we literally thought, does it make sense for us to continue doing this when this kind of urgency attack on government was occurring? And we sat back and said, successful government services in their own way are a bulwark for democracy, for people's belief in government. And so we increasingly thought about this book as not just how, but hope, and really trying to good work creates more support for the work that you all do. And in that way, the book is really about how and hope. So the book is written in two parts. The first part of the book, there's a chapter on each one of these four tenets: people or policy, follow the facts, focus on how, push for results. And I will walk through each one of these with 2 or 3, 4 slides pretty quickly. The second part of the book are 4 case studies, one on transportation, one on healthcare, one on the Department of Children and Families, called Different Things in Different States. And the last chapter is about COVID. And I think it's one of the first published book kinds of things written by folks that were actually involved in the in states' response to COVID. So there's a quiz at the end of this, and I'll ask everybody to come off mute to participate. But these are the 4 things that I'm going to talk about right now: people or policy, follow the facts, focus on how, and push for results. So here we go. Starting with people with policy. We always start with people or policy. And this may sound too basic, but but we start here to ensure that you actually have the people, to have the capacity and the capability to do the work that needs to be done. These are some of the things that we focus on and talk about in our People Are Policy chapter. We strongly stress the importance of, when you are at the beginning of a new initiative, or if you have the opportunity as a new manager or as a new leader, or if there's a change in administration and that you're picked or promoted to be a part of that new effort, or to attack an older problem. We cannot say enough about selecting the leaders and building the teams to make that happen. Speaking as Governor Baker as a Republican, myself as a Democrat, this isn't about partisanship. It isn't about whether you have an R or a D or an I or a G after your name, but it's really about picking people for their knowledge and, importantly, their know-how. And so some folks really are great subject matter experts, and other people really know how to actually deliver on something, either the ins and outs of an agency, or are really strong at a variety of project management. I saw that one person is experienced in Lean Six Sigma, but folks that know how to do it are just as important as folks that know about a topic. I'm a huge believer in, particularly when you're tackling an area that has been a problem, is to fully respect and work with current staff. But if it's especially if it's a big problem that has been lingering for or quite evident for a while, the power of bringing in new people with new perspectives, new knowledge, new know-how, and combining that with the current staff is a really important thing to do. I've worked on some initiatives with current staff alone, but I can tell you we've moved so much faster when we've had the opportunity to tackle issues with both some new people. It could be some current people who have been promoted or in new roles, and the current staff. And then our work, as you know, is not my way or the highway, but it's intensely collaborative. It's intensely, team sport. And that to pick folks that really are truly collaborative in how they think about doing their work, and that your team is as diverse as it possibly can be. People or Policy provides a structural umbrella for the results framework. And this so-called soft stuff is really the hard stuff of governing. So People or Policy is the first tenet in the results framework. I talked about this a little bit. Throughout the book, we have tips, tools, and tactics. Here's an example of one of the tips, is that when you are tackling a new initiative or you're taking on a new responsibility, dedicate the time at the beginning to select your leaders and build your teams. When some folks have said, Steve, it's really hard to hire, it's really hard to make changes in bureaucracies. And I counter that and say, you don't have to be bureaucratic in order to help make a bureaucracy work. And if you really focus this as a priority, you can get new job descriptions, new postings, people in place quickly and effectively. But it requires really, really intense focus and intention to make it happen. So the first tenet is follow the facts. The first tenet is People or Policy. The second tenet of the results framework is follow the facts. There are two kinds of facts that we focus on: data evidence and points of pain. And we use facts very importantly to define the problem to solve and to point to the kinds of interventions that would be needed. Now, data evidence is the so-called hard data. It's the stuff you can read. Budgets, organization charts, reports, metrics if you have them, reports and program descriptions, the detailed stuff that you can read and articulate. I used to, I think, almost exclusively focus here, in part because there didn't seem to be enough attention on the data evidence pieces, and I thought it was really important to base whatever action you were taking on some data evidence. However, I've increasingly found it important to also uncover and respect the so-called points of pain, and these are the stories that come from the folks that you're serving, the folks that are providing the services, and in some cases media reports. And the combination of the two has really proven powerful to help both get a hard evidence understanding of what's happening with an issue and a real world understanding of what it means to an individual, a family, a community. And also importantly, the folks that are providing that service. I'm going to do a couple of tips when, particularly at the beginning of evaluating and trying to understand a problem or an issue. I've conducted, Governor Baker has conducted, and it's worked in all kinds of settings. Most recently, I've done this with an engagement at the World Bank with a group that was working in Africa, but I've done it in transportation, healthcare, and on. And it's pretty simple, but it's super powerful. And it's the group that is working on the initiative, and it could initially be the senior leadership team and the folks that are close there, or it could be the project team. But it's literally to go around the room, around the table, and ask each person to, at the beginning, it might be, what do you see as the point of pain, or what do you see as the most important thing that we can address? And so often in a meeting, all eyes go to whoever has the most power on the org chart, and everything is discussed through that point. The point around the table is that everybody speaks. The person who is the leader, or who has the the highest title, does not respond to each one of the points. And what you get is this very wonderful dynamic of people building off one another's comments. Some interesting truths come out, some interesting questions come out, some interesting challenges come out. And I've done this, as I said, in a variety of different settings. I've done it very often at the beginning of an initiative, and I've also done it when we are in our leadership reviews, and ask people to go around the table to talk about, again, what do they see as an issue, what's working, what's not, etc. Very powerful tool, very simple. Please think about using this as a tool in where you work. The second tip I'll just share, and it's there's no super brilliance here, but it's really the emphasis on getting out of your own circle, getting out of the tower. Organizations, quickly look at inside to learn about what's going on and what's being done. And I've found that this is it's an important perspective, but it's an incredibly limiting perspective. So I'm always asking and encouraging people that I'm working with to ask, what are other people doing? What do you have for peer data? It could be that if you're working in one part of your organization, that another part of your organization has done some really interesting things. And so this tip is really get out, talk and listen to people, go beyond your internal reports, make site visits, and really importantly is speak to the folks that you're trying to serve, the customers. So the first tenet of the results framework are people are policy. The second is follow the facts. Here's the third, focus on how. And here too, there are two critical elements: what to do and how to do it. And the focus on how, I actually think, is the newest thing that we brought to, and yet it's not new, but the newest focus that we brought to leadership and management conversations. There are and so there are a variety of different ways to move something from facts to result. But too often in state government or in our private sector work, we saw things stop after a really good idea and people really struggling with, how do I get that idea to actually be implemented, get that change implemented? And so the focus on how is our big focus on how to make that really meaningful transition from the problem that the facts are defining to meaningful results. So what to do is the what. It might be the a law, it might be a budget, it might be an action plan, it could be an administrative order, it could be a directive memo. It's the description of what it is that you want to accomplish. How to do it is all about how do you organize the work from design to delivery. And we go through this in pretty good detail. in the third chapter of the results framework. And I'm going to talk about some of these items in just a second. The work management triangle, a dedicated team, releases, and so on. And I just want to read out loud the very bottom piece of this slide. Talented people and being data-driven are not sufficient. Results require an understanding of how things work, a method, and the know-how to make it happen. And so let me go through 2 or 3 tips to try to make this a little bit more real. But first I'll talk about what and how. And so these are 2, maybe they were a little bit dopey diagrams, but one's a diamond, and I say it's poised on a precarious point because I could imagine just with a little bit of push, it falls over. And too many times, agencies, some leaders have spent all this time focusing on the what, and not much on the how, and it's sort of they kick the can down. And I think one of the most powerful examples for me was Obamacare and the huge legislative battle in Congress to make this really important law and improvement in people's life happen. And then when it was rolled out, they didn't spend enough time on the rollout, and it fell flat. Not only did it fall flat, some people who had insurance lost insurance. They quickly recovered and focused on the how. And now over 20 million people around the country have healthcare coverage that didn't have it before. So I want folks to focus on a foundation built on what and how, is to make sure you spend time on the why and the what, but the actual results will only happen if you are spending at least the majority of your resources on the how. So that's my 2 little dopey diagrams. So I think I'm going to do 2 or 3 tips right now. So this first tip, I call it's the work management triangle. And I say flip the work management triangle and focus on time. So the work management triangle is scope. So scope is what it is you are trying to get done in a project. Time is time, the amount of time that has been allotted. And resources is everything from personnel, IT, dollars, equipment, facilities, everything that goes in, that's involved in the actual delivery of tackling work. Probably for 2+ decades, and I've spent a lot of time on very big projects. We would focus on scope, and it was more or less typical waterfall approach, where we would focus on scope, and it would take us months, if we were speeding along, to fully describe all the things that needed to be done to address this particular issue. And it would then take a year or years to actually deliver something. And so often, I'd say for me, it was about 50-50 in terms of a success rate. In the beginning of 2015, in the beginning of Governor Baker's administration, we began to flip things so that we focused on time and and time first, not scope first. And we would, in part because of necessity, but in part because of methodology, is to say there are 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 2 weeks. You need to roll out X. We need to get this accomplished. And over and over and over again, focusing on time has worked. It's created this unbelievable sense of urgency. We used an agile approach, and we've modified it, but we used a basic agile Scrum approach. This concept of starting with time, this does not mean you can get the full scope done, but starting with time and then and then in a release, this next tip, in this 8 to 10 week time period, successfully delivering that piece of scope, and then going on to the next release and the next release. If any of you, all of you have, some kind of smartphone, my phone this morning said I needed to press this button in order to update the release to 16.02, I think, of the iOS system. And so that concept of release in technology is the concept that we wanted to bring to our work in healthcare, in child welfare, in transportation. And we would focus in terms of the release, we would set an overall time frame. It typically was 8 to 12 weeks. We would determine what the core work streams were and what the critical problems and essential deliverables were that needed to be addressed. We'd put together the team, we'd attack this through 2-week agile sprints. And at a different time, I'm happy to talk through agile and what a daily scrum is all about. But here are the 3 key questions that are asked in typically either a daily stand-up meeting for agile scrum, or we modified that so that teams would meet 2 or 3 times a week, but still the intensity of this, and then leadership reviews. But this concept of time and the urgency that it provides, and this concept of release, that there are a certain set of deliverables that will be accomplished in this relatively short period of time, is an incredible, powerful tool for how. And now the final tip that I'll talk about here under focus for how, and that's the dedicated team. And a dedicated team is, it could be as few as 2 or 3 people. In larger efforts, it's going to be a lot more. But as opposed to having 10% or 20% of 20 people focused on something, the idea of the dedicated team is to say, here are 2, 3, 4 people who will act as the core engine for the change initiative, and they can do a whole variety of different things. Every time I have not tackled things with and it could literally be a very big problem, but I always have made sure that it had 2, 3, 4 people at its core, and then added other people as necessary. Those 2, 3, 4 people are unbelievable force generators for the folks who are putting in the 10, 20, 30% time. So this concept of a dedicated team works. And it's really hard to do in agencies unless you are really focused on it. I'm looking at the clock, so I'm going to speed up a little bit here. Push for results is the 4th tenet. You have people or policy, follow the facts, focus on how, and push for results. And push for results for us has a couple of important facets to it. One is we're super focused on performance metrics and project status. Project status in terms of how are you actually doing with delivering the elements towards getting things done, and performance metrics on measuring not how many meetings you had, but it's literally how are you doing in terms of addressing a particular problem. How are you doing on improving a service that you are tackling? We emphasize that while it's important for a project team to be doing this, it's really important to be focused on this in leadership reviews. And importantly, whatever you set out to do and you're going to make huge best efforts, good teams, best efforts. Hopefully you're resourced adequately, but they almost never will work out as intended. And so the important thing about push for results is, in a leadership review, is to have the honest conversation of the measurement. What is happening project status? And we use a red, yellow, green project status. What is the actual performance the service of the deliverable. Evaluate it, be honest about it, make adjustments, and then repeat. And so it's this important opportunity to be honest about where things are at, to be humble about where things are at, and then to make adjustments as needed. I talked a tiny bit about project management and a tiny bit about performance metrics. I'm going to skip over this. I'm going to do now in about 6 or 7 slides, and I think I'll stop in about 10 slides. But I'm going to go through a case, and so this idea of her name was Bella. So this is the front page of the Boston Globe, and I'm reading from our book, page 171. There were 3 terrible tragedies that all happened to the Department of Children with 2 children that had been in some kind of service provided by the Department of Children and Families in 2015. And so this first incident was Baby Doe. On Thursday, June 25th, 2015, a woman in Winthrop, a coastal town just north of Boston, made a horrid discovery. She was walking her dog along the shoreline of Deer Island when she found an object that concerned her, and she called 911. The Massachusetts State Police uncovered the remains of a girl of toddler age, and it was just in absolutely foul conditions. The news was stunning. As a community, we had not yet recovered from the loss of Jeremiah Oliver 1 year earlier, another real horrible tragedy. Now this. The hunt for more information about Baby Doe drove national news stories throughout the summer. What happened to this innocent child would hang like a dark cloud over all of us. So Baby Doe, on September 19th, the front page of the Boston Globe, Baby Doe, her name was Bella. Now this news came out right in the midst of, and the picture on the left-hand side was the police caricature of what they could make from the remains of the child, and the picture on the right was a picture that was found in her mother's home. Excuse me. So we were in the middle of a turnaround for the Department of Children and Families. I'm going to talk briefly about what some of these elements were. And we had really some terrific leadership there. The Secretary of Health and Human Services was a experienced, practiced social worker, very strong leader, Mary Lou Sutters. The head of the agency we just recruited also was a national leader in child welfare reform, also a former social worker. So a very strong leadership team. But we needed to help them. They were just struggling. So we focused on governance, an executive team with the commissioner, a representative from the secretary, folks from the governor's office, and a few other members of the leadership team. And then what was created was this agency improvement leadership team. It was the first time that folks can remember that not only were central office people included in the turnaround effort or in any effort, in any of the major efforts or development of policies at the Department of Children and Families, but the leadership of the field was included as well. There was a dedicated project team. The project management was release-based, so it was 8, 10, 12 weeks for each release. It was an agile Scrum methodology. I'm going to talk about getting to green in a minute. It was a red, yellow, green project status updates, and the work streams that were focused on beginning in the very beginning of September, the first week or two of September, were these work streams. These derived from the points of pain conversations: policy and practice, people, the management structure of the organization, metrics and reporting and communications. And there were leadership reviews of the executive team in the agency, improvement leadership team, first 3 times a week. And these were in person at the time. And then they happened twice a week. And at each one of these leadership review meetings, we would have a project status update, red, yellow, green. We would have an update on metrics, and we would conclude these leadership review meetings with around the table, which was incredibly powerful, cathartic, really interesting for the organization. Daily Scrum is something that I note here. You could take a look at this later if you're interested in taking a look at the deck. Excuse me. So for each of these 5 work streams: policy and practice, people, management structure, metrics and reporting and communications, we wanted to make sure that they launched well and strongly. And so and in the book, we talk about getting to green, a checklist. And for this effort, for each one of these work streams, we wanted to make sure there was a clear objective and goal established, that the scope was clearly defined in the language of Agile Scrum, that the product backlog, the deliverables were clearly defined, the sprint backlog, that the items that were going to be addressed in the next 2 weeks were defined, that we were really clear about the communication that was necessary and the metrics. We really were focused on metrics as early on as possible. So for each of those 5 different work streams, they were required to put together these a report. This was a sample report that was given to them. You can see across the top, the objective, the scope, the sprint backlog, the product backlog, the communications, etc. There's a description of each one of these. The sprint that was focused on was a 2-week sprint. The product backlog were the items that need to be addressed but weren't addressed in this particular 2-week sprint. So here's an example of not a sample, right, but the people status update report from October 1st. This effort started the first or second week of September. So this was either the first or second report. We had worked it out so that the Department of Children and Families was getting new funding, and they needed to hire a lot of people. So it's probably hard to read this, but so their objective was the people piece at the top. Their scope was posting and filling positions and streamlining the hiring process. The metric was literally how they were doing to fill the positions. And so in the sprint product, the graph below, the top line post. So here, in just a couple of weeks, they had posted 121 of their 200 open positions. This is an organization that had difficulty making a hire in months, and here, in a matter of weeks, they had posted 120 positions. It was like mind-blowing, as well as doing a number of other things. They were so proud of this that, as part of their report, they took a picture of this of one of the bulletin boards with all the positions posted. So that approach, the different work streams, the agile Scrum approach, the release approach. Here, just some. I'm going to go quickly through some of the examples of the releases. This first release was just before Thanksgiving, I think. So September to just before Thanksgiving in November. They drafted and negotiated and were ready to roll out 2 policies. these were two core policies to the agency. It would typically take the agency a couple of years, if not 5 years, to develop a policy. Here they had done it in 10 weeks. They had posted all 200 positions. They had restored a management structure, and that was in this 10-week period. In the following release, more policies. They began to onboard the people, and DCF, the Department of Children and Family, hired its first ever medical director, a really important thing. Here's a couple more snapshots and some releases further out. Release 4, about not quite a year later, they were able to bring on board 29 new medical social workers. They held foster parent recruitment events in all of their regions. And then this last item on the bottom of release 6, 95% of ongoing social workers had fewer than 20 families in their caseloads. And I'm going to deep dive into this for just a minute. Excuse me, I'm going to take a sip. So Governor Baker was pushing that. So I'm just going to describe this chart and then describe the follow-on chart. We had been hearing that caseloads for social workers were a real issue on the one hand. And on the other hand, if you look at this chart and you look at the mean and the median numbers, therefore the averages on the lower right-hand side, 18, 19. Well, the goal, the collective bargaining labor goal was for each social worker to have 16 cases. The idea that the mean was 18 or 19 didn't feel like that was that off to us and to leadership. And so until we unpacked the average, we unpacked the mean and laid out by social worker what their caseload was, could the screen come out as to really what was happening in the field. So this chart, every single one of these vertical lines, so the tallest line in the middle is a yellow orangish line. It's with the number 186 at the top. That's 186 social workers had a caseload of 19. To the right, 164 case workers had a caseload of 20. To the right of that, 156 case workers had a caseload of 21 and on. And so you could see this incredible disparate spread of caseload to case workers. And so in fact, over 40% of the case workers had caseloads of over 20, and some much larger. And it's not an arbitrary number. Yes, it's a negotiated number, the 16, but the idea of having this target number was that number of cases was a number that a caseworker could handle, and therefore handle safely for the child and the family. Did a ton of work on several different releases. And so this chart, the first chart was March 2016. So here's 15 months later, really a dramatic difference. If you look at the mean and median number over on the right-hand side, they're 15.8 and 16. That's okay, that's good. But the real power of this, as you can see, all but 11% of the caseworkers had caseloads that were 20 and under, a really dramatic improvement. And so here's a chart of then and now. Then was September 2015 when we started the effort. Now, excuse me, for the most part was December 2017. The number of staff that were added, social workers, were almost 300 or 13%. The second row, the percentage of social workers with licenses, when we got there, it was 54%. In a year and a half, it was almost 99%, and on a lot of new policies and so forth. So during COVID, there was a real terrible tragedy with two children with disabilities who lost their lives, and Commissioner Spears and her team dove right at that. No apologies, dove right at it with this methodology, and very quickly developed an approach to turn that around. But I want to end with this quote and one other quote from Mary McGowan, and she's been a super strong advocate for children in Massachusetts. If I could change this one thing, I think we should stop referring to it as reforming the department. That suggests there's going to be an end. Our child welfare system needs to be continually enhanced. And I think that's true for all of our work, is that even with success on a change, a success to tackle a problem, a success to deliver out a new service, there's always more work to be done, and it's never one and done. If I think about going back to the beginning of this talk about context, the other piece of context for me is the status quo. And no matter what kind of change you're making, a small procedural change or a big programmatic change, you have to be super aware and respect the status quo and work from where folks add to where they need to be. So I'd like everybody to go off mute right now. And here's your quiz. So what are the 4 parts to the results framework? What's part 1? Come off mute, folks. What's the first part? Yes, people are policy. What's the second part?
Follow the facts.
Follow the facts.
Follow the facts. Yes. The third part?
Focus on how.
Focus on
Focus
how.
on how. And the fourth part?
Push for results.
Yes. So bravo. And so there you have it in a nutshell. And I'll end with this quote and then one last slide. And this is a little bit like Mary McGowan's quote, but it's from he's one of the greatest humans I think that has walked on this earth in the last 100 years, Nelson Mandela. After climbing a great hill, one only finds that there are many more to climb. Again, a comment about your work, our work. And I want to thank you for your service. We wrote this book for you. And in the dedication of the book, we literally had 2 in front of us. We had one to our wives, who we love, and then we had this that we had put together. And we both, Governor Baker and I both said, this is our opportunity to thank the folks that are delivering the service, that are doing the work, and we'll acknowledge our wives in the acknowledgement section. So this book was written for you, to those who believe in public service, in the good it must do, and who constantly strive to deliver on its promise. And so that's our dedication in the book. And with that, that took me too long. Kate and Heather, I apologize, but that is the end of my formal talk. I'm completely happy to answer any questions. I understand that it's 3, and if folks need to go, of course, please. So.
And fantastic. So I'll start just by saying thank you, and thank you for ending on this note, and thanking everyone who joined. We are going to turn off the recording.